Is Troubadour as busted as we thought? This is the question I want to answer in this somewhat, at least I try to be very concise in this video, but I can't promise you anything. So grab a cup of tea and enjoy my discussion here. And of course, let me know your takes in the comments down below. If you haven't seen already, I already did a video about Paragon where I discussed it quite deeply, what I think about it, and I will cover all the other elite specs that I of course test during the beta event week coming in the next few days as well. So stay tuned for that. As always, special shout out to all my dear supporters that help me keep the lights on, and now without much further ado, let's jump straight in. So I will go over every single thing that I thought is worth mentioning about Troubadour and what I think it, how it works, how it's good, what not, and also compare it, for example, to Chronomancer, especially in PvE, but of course also look at the competitive modes. So if you're only interested in a specific part of my discussion, be sure to use the timestamps below so that you actually get to what you actually want to see my opinion on. Now, with that much said, let's start with how Troubadour functions, how I like the general profession mechanic, and all that good stuff. So let's start with the F skills, so the shatters. They get these music instruments, and yes, we already knew how it worked and stuff. There was no crazy change there, but I think when I play it myself, it feels fun. It's really cool. It has interesting attacks. It's definitely, the crescendo is an amazing attack, especially in PvE. It feels so satisfying, like giving yourself like 50% of your health bar as barrier into your allies. That's really cool. And it's just really fun to play. I also think the general interaction, how you can use those instruments, and then the crescendo, it makes a lot of sense. It's fun. The thing that I don't like is that it's really like, it has a cast time. Yeah, for me as someone that enjoys Mesmer, Core Mesmer specifically, like with the Core Shatters and Chronomancer, Mirage, those have instant cast shatters. This is for me always something that makes a lot of sense. It's fun, it's an interactive like gameplay. You can use them whenever you need them. Don't have to like be aware, oh, I have to cast it now so that I have it in 1 second. And this is not the case for Troubadour, so that's something that I don't like the gameplay of. That's somewhat similar with Virtuoso, but not as bad, as you have some instant cast as well on there. So I think that's a little bit annoying. I think especially the crescendo is very long cast time. Yes, it's only 1¼ second, I think, but it feels quite painful slow, especially in competitive modes. I had it so many times that I get interrupted there, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I will get to competitive modes later, but I think in general the gameplay is fun, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying I like to have instant cast. Of course that would be probably broken, that's a balance issue there, yes, I get that, but I think it would be more fun for me if the potency would be tuned down, but they would be instant cast. I don't know, that's what I like to have this playstyle of. Then let's talk a bit about the tails, so the utility skills. I think they are actually quite flexible, and that's a really cool part. I think the tails, not necessarily the healing tail, but the utility tails are actually really good in terms of like covering boons that you would not otherwise cover. So if you're specifically going for heal Troubadour, so if I don't mention it specifically, I always talk about heal Troubadour because I think that's the best support way of playing Troubadour. I think we will cover it later. There are also big DPS builds to play, some offensive support builds, and in competitive modes other builds as well, but typically I cover here heal Troubadour the most. That's why I talk about it like a lot. I think the boon coverage amazing. It's really crazy how much like protection, all the good stuff, regeneration, all the healing and alacrity is output there, even a lot of barrier. It's just really nicely covered, and the tails just help with that. You don't need them, but you can use them, for example, to get some nice Fury and Might up very easily, and even alacrity can be covered as well, not only by your F4 with the trait. You can drop your Fabby Relic if you go for the swiftness and super speed tail. That's really good because you then are free to use the Flock Relic, which is obviously really good if you use the mantra. So the tails are really nice, in my opinion, really flexible skills. I would not run full tails. I would rather go, for example, for a concentration mantra and maybe some kind of like other good utility skills like a portal or a reflect or whatever you need, but it's very flexible. You can easily put them in when you need them. I think that's really good design. And of course, let's talk about the elite skill, the big elephant in the room. Yes, Distortion Share is busted. I already could have told you that before the beta event, but that just proves it. In all game modes, actually having a 2-second invulnerability share with your allies, it's just insane. On top of that, the Chaos Aura or the other good stuff of the elite skill, but it's definitely the Distortion Share. I'm not sure if they will leave it in that. I think it's absolutely broken. It's more forgiving than it ever was because it's 2 seconds instead of 1 that we had before. It's just really, really strong. 2 seconds of invulnerability, not only for ourselves, but also for allies. A lot of mechanics can be negated by that in PvE. A lot of like mechanics overlapping can be negated by that. So because you don't have to like be very careful when to cast it, 2 seconds is quite lenient there. So it's actually crazy. So it's absolutely broken and definitely by far the best elite skill that you have and helps you so much in a lot of situations in all game modes. So definitely big like unique feature of Troubadour. Not only as a healer, in all builds, it's actually really strong utility skill, or elite skill rather. So I think that's definitely something that you have to keep in mind. I expect it to get nerfed, to be honest. It's too strong, but it's definitely fun to play, don't get me wrong. Let's talk now a little bit about Chronomancer, yeah, because yes, this is a video about Troubadour, but I think Chronomancer is like the biggest competition against the Troubadour itself. So let's take a look at it, see how Chronomancer fares against it. And with the changes to F4, with the Bountiful Disillusionment trait, which gave you stability on your F4 skill, this is now gone. It's now on the F5 skill, so on the Continuum Split or the Crescendo. So the stability is now way harder to access, especially on Chronomancer, and that is obviously a big problem if you wanted to have crazy stability output, but Chronomancer is still very easily able to upkeep a lot of stability with the Well of Precognition, with your stability mantra, and you even have other good tools to provide stability with the Continuum Split, for example, again, stuff like that. So the stability access is still very good, don't forget that, and you can still provide Ages with your F4 on Chronomancer. So in general, it's like definitely very much top tier support, Chronomancer, because of just how flexible it is. And I think that's the point already. Chronomancer, in my opinion, is more flexible than Troubadour. I think Troubadour is a really nice support, has crazy boon access, crazy healing. I think the healing output is higher than on Chronomancer. And as you can see in the background, I could easily outlast the extreme damaging field. It's not as high the healing output as Paragon as far as I like get my comparison, but the boon output is very easy. You have Distortion Share, that's also very good, of course, and you have crazy barrier output. That's absolutely strong. And the cool part is what Chronomancer has, but not as much as Troubadour, is Boon Extension. Troubadour has insane amount of Boon Extension if you wanted to, and that's obviously really strong. And of course, the stability access on Troubadour is also quite frequent and nice. I think the only thing that Troubadour lacks is the flexibility of Chronomancer. Chronomancer has the Well, and all the Wells actually are really good. And don't forget, Troubadour can't use stuff twice, whereas Chronomancer can use all the stuff, healing, boons, whatever you need, twice. So you are quite flexible. So if you want to have double feedback, double CC, double healing, you can do that. On Troubadour, you have to use it once, and if it's gone, it's gone. And that's a little bit more punishing in that sense, and so the flexibility is a little bit worse. And don't forget, the best part about Troubadour is the Distortion Share, and that's on the lead skill. And Mesmer elite skills are extremely strong. So if you need the Distortion Share, you can't go for any other crazy good elite skill, like more, like even the Time Warp, even like Mass Invisibility, or if you're on Chronomancer, the Gravity Well. There are many good skills in the elite skill slot, so you really have to choose and pick. And if you always go for the Distortion Share, you lose your more and you have way less CC. If you're on Asura, you still have a nice CC bar on Troubadour, but if you're just playing on whatever race, then there is decent CC, but you have to commit quite a lot of your skills to get the CC out. Keep that in mind. So I think there is a spot for Chronomancer and Troubadour as a support. I really think so. I think Chronomancer is still, in my opinion, slightly better than Troubadour as a support. Why is that? Because I think Chronomancer is more flexible. You can put it in any encounter, any group, and you can fill each slot. Troubadour is only Alacrity, is only providing healing and stuff, and has Distortion Share. Don't forget that. It's really good. You're very flexible, definitely a really meta support for sure, but I think Chronomancer is still the top on top. It's slightly better in my opinion. And now to the sad part, I think Mirage got caught in the crossfire. So any healing Mirage build, Celestial or full-fledged healer, it got caught in the crossfire. It got nerfed by the Dune Cloak changes, so you really can't spam Dune Cloak and Mirage Cloaks that often anymore, and you lost your stability access completely because Mirage doesn't have any F5, so you don't get stability. It's really sad. You only have stability now on the Mantra of Concentration, so you lose a lot of value on Mirage, which is really sad. I really like this build, and it's now, I don't know, it fell off drastically in my opinion. It's don't get me wrong, on a healing encounter, and especially on Celestial, I think it's still completely fine and still worth playing. It's really strong, but it lost its flexibility with a lot of things that just came on top of that. But I think it was not targeted. It just got caught by the DPS Mirage nerf and caught by the Chronomancer stability nerf. It's a little bit sad. But now let's talk about something more fun, which are the traits. I think the Troubadour traits are actually, I would say, quite interesting. I think they have done a rather good job with the traits there. They are all quite unique and give you some interesting gameplay. I think some of them are not that good, but most of them, like at least like 70 to 80%, I think I actually like quite a lot. They all have their values. The sad part is the middle column is really just you take distortion and alacrity in PvE. You know, if you don't take that, I don't know what you're doing. And the sad part is, even though it doesn't give alacrity in competitive modes, even there, you always take that. You want the distortion. So I think personally, they should split it. That might be a hot take, but I think they should split it. They should give another trait the distortion, and the alacrity should be on another trait. So that you in PvE have to make the decision. Do I want the invulnerability or do I want the alacrity providing? Not both of the most overpowered things in one thing. But I think the traits other than that are actually quite nice. You have the Condi trait that gives you some healing as well. You have the CC trait in the first column. You also have the really nice right column where you have interesting decisions with the after image. You have interesting like crescendo effects, like using the crescendo to reset the cooldowns of your instruments or using the instruments to reset the cooldown of the crescendo. I think that's really interesting. I like those traits. I think overall Troubadour was surprisingly fun to theory craft, and even though I don't like the general instrument playing mechanic, because like I said, I think I like more instant cast effects and not some lingering effects and stuff like that, but I still like this a lot. I think it's really fun. I will probably play it a lot just because I will probably go into Troubadour jail after this here. And what can I say? The after image effect as well is a very interesting effect. It's not like completely fleshed out when you would take this, when this is really absolutely broken. But it's really cool. It's an effect that you can use your instruments twice, so to say. You will not get the boons twice from using your F skills, but you will get the effect twice. So you can, for example, get the healing of the harp or get the CC of the drum twice, which is really interesting, really useful in some situations. I can definitely see competitive mode builds that can be really annoying with that. But in general, I actually liked it a lot. And now before I get to the best thing here about Troubadour, I also want to mention, if you like this video, be sure to leave a like, and if you want to see more of this series and other Guild Wars 2 content, be sure to subscribe. But now let's talk about why I think Troubadour is even better than I already told you, is that you don't have to be target gated anymore. Chronomancer needs a target to somewhat upkeep its boons, yeah, and its clones and its healing. Yes, you can pre-stack quite nicely, but if you go into a fight and you get stripped, you can't get the boons that easily if you don't have a target anymore. That's just a fact. Troubadour doesn't have that problem. You can stack up the nodes, they will not go away. That's the clone replacement. So it's like exactly like Virtuoso, and that's really high quality of life. It's really easy to get the boons out because you can stack the nodes. You don't need to have any target. It's just amazing. Really, really big plus for Troubadour because of that. And I already mentioned the Boon Extension is way better than on Chronomancer. If you really wanted to, you can use 3 skills that give a Boon Extension, and you can spam them quite frequently, which is obviously really strong. Boon Extension is something really underrated in my opinion, in PvE specifically, to help your allies out with upkeeping the boons that might be otherwise lacking a bit if the other support is not that good, or if you just have problems providing perma stability. This helps a lot. So I think Boon Extension definitely carries Troubadour on top of it's already really being really good. So in summary, I would say Chronomancer and Troubadour both have their spot in PvE as a support, and definitely if there are no further changes to Chronomancer or Troubadour, definitely will be meta picks in my opinion. And of course, I think the Distortion Share will probably get nerfed, but it's still definitely a really, really solid support build, even if you don't have the Distortion Share. Keep that in mind. But now let's talk a little bit about other builds than support, because Troubadour is very flexible. You can easily play a full DPS Troubadour. I would say power DPS Troubadour looks actually surprisingly good. I don't have a benchmark yet, but I definitely see a power DPS Troubadour being decently playable. I'm not sure if it will be top DPS and really rival other power Mesmer specs, but definitely playable. I think especially in competitive modes, I think a full or somewhat burst damage focused, power damage focused bruiser or full DPS is definitely viable. But even in PvE, I think a full power DPS looks quite decent. I think Condi DPS is also viable. I think it depends who you ask, but I personally think Condi DPS might be very good in some circumstances and very bad in others, because you really rely on one trait to provide a lot of conditions, which is quite nice if you can upkeep this. If you can't, you will lack a lot of damage. Other than that, I think it's actually quite fun, especially with the Celestial trait, so to say, that gives you all the stat increases, which is obviously really insane if you play Celestial. I think it's actually quite fun to make a build out of that. I will get to this at some point, hopefully, and make a really interesting, crazy solo Troubadour build. The last thing that I want to mention here is, with DPS builds, I think Troubadour is somewhat easy to play as a Boon DPS as well. You can play Condi Boon DPS, Power Boon DPS. I think the alacrity upkeeping is not a big deal, because you can just take the alacrity trade and you will probably able to upkeep it quite easily. If you have issues, you can even take more boon duration if you wanted to, or if you want, especially on a Condi build, you have chaos on top of that, so that helps you with boon duration, and then you have the tail that I mentioned earlier that gives alacrity as well. So I think you're really flexible as a boon DPS as well. I think, and don't forget, even full DPS or boon DPS doesn't matter, you still have access to Distortion Share. That makes it extremely viable as well as a DPS build, because you just have invulnerability sharing to your allies. So you're not a support that heals allies, but you can still give them invulnerability. It's really strong. I think Troubadour is, for now, looking like an extremely flexible spec, filling each role with the exception of quickness. It's actually crazy. It's really strong. But now let's talk about the competitive modes. I think in competitive modes, let's start with World versus World. I think a full support in a Zerg is obviously really strong. You have the Distortion Share, you have Barrier, you have Stability. What else do you want? You know, healing on there, it's good. It's good. And you don't have the clones anymore, so they don't get one-shot or stuff like that. So you can get your nodes up and use your nice shatters with the maximum value. It's definitely a really, really good World versus World Zerg spec. And even as a roamer, I think it's definitely really good. I think there you can play some CC roamer, you can play some Celestial roamer or something like that. Even some full Condi build, I think, could be viable, like some kind of Tormenting Confusion roamer. I see that as well. I think they are really interesting builds to be played. In general, I think they are really nice builds that you could play in World versus World. Now let's talk about PvP. PvP is, I would say, a little bit less flexible as World versus World. I think the CC DPS build, as you can see in the background, it's really surprisingly strong. You have a lot of damage and it's really annoying. I could see that being run as some kind of aggressive side noding build, because you have a lot of CC on the point, you have a lot of damage also from range with your F1, or to at least some extent, and you have some really annoyingness with the just distortion that you have baseline if you use the traits on the F4. You also have Distortion Share with your elite skill, of course. Again, stuff like that is actually quite underrated. You can actually help your teammates there as well if you're in a team fight. But even as a side noding build, I actually see that build being decent. But as I mentioned earlier, especially in PvP, that is the issue. The cast time on the crescendo, or cast time in general on the F skills, is sometimes really painful. You get interrupted before you get your really nice healing effect of the F4 out. You don't get your crescendo out with the big barrier. That's really painful. You die very easily, even if you have the cooldowns up. Sometimes you just die because you get interrupted, because it's not instant cast. Maybe that's a skill issue for me, but I personally think that's definitely keeping Troubadour a little bit more in check. And the same goes for full support. Not that much there, but full support in PvP, I played it. It's really fun. It's really strong. You have a lot of nice boons and healing output. It feels almost better than Chronomancer to some extent as a boon support. I think it's hard to judge just from a little bit of playing it, but I personally think it's definitely worthwhile playing as a full support in PvP, and like I said, in all game modes actually. So I think Troubadour overall, to summarize it here, I think Troubadour looks really strong. It's, I think, as busted as we thought, to get back to my question at the beginning, and I think even with some nerfs to Distortion Share incoming, I think it's actually still looking really powerful and really fun to play. I think I still am not like too sold on the fantasy personally, but I think the gameplay itself looks quite fun and it looks really strong, and I can't wait to try out more during the actual release of the expansion to see how it works in like real new encounters, how it works with the Distortion Share, if it's still in the game. And other than that, I'm just hyped about it. Let me know your takes in the comments down below. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks again to all my supporters, and I hope to see you in the next video.